Hello and welcome to this edition of Tech Deck Karaoke. I am Joe Onisick, your host and MC for the show. This is the show where I'm this week by Sabrina Shafer, who is always our esteemed judge of who presented it better, and our impartial guest, as well as Mark Hinkle, who I will allow to introduce himself, the CEO of TriggerMesh.
I am Mark Hinkle. I am CEO and co-founder of TriggerMesh. We are a open source cloud native integration company, and we are citizens of the world, headquartered in North Carolina, but all over the place.
Excellent, Mark. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for allowing me to present your slides without ever having seen them or having any knowledge of the technology you provide. That's a huge privilege of mine.
What can go wrong?
Nothing at all. So I would like to just make sure for the audience that, Mark, you have just recently provided me these slides. We have not gone over them. I don't have any insider information into this information, do I?
No, none at all. Neither do I.
None at all. Excellent. Even playing field. And Sabrina, can you confirm this?
Confirmed. Yes. Confirmed.
Confirmed. All right. And are we ready to go?
Alrighty.
So I am Joe Onisick, and I will be presenting TriggerMesh's technology. This deck is build event-driven architecture with TriggerMesh, open source, cloud-native integration platform. As we all know, an event-driven architecture is an architecture that is driven by events. What enterprises are facing that would drive the need for an architecture driven by events is all of this interesting interconnectivity that we see here in the middle. This swarm of interconnected application systems and middleware is what's driving our modern application architectures. And as these applications services are interacting, they're interacting on what we would call events. When we look at an event could be anything, like that birthday party that you're going to next week for that person that you don't really like, but you're obligated to go see. Or in our application world, we could be talking about an item being added to a shopping cart, an item being shipped from inventory, or something similar to that effect. So when we're looking at this convoluted mess of your current enterprise crapitecture, what you have is a constant flood of events that are interconnected in such a way with a need to be reined in with more control and intelligence.
I believe that Tim Berners-Lee actually named the internet the worldwide crapitecture before they renamed it to World Wide Web, to be sure.
That was alpha or beta name. I can't remember, but they went through some iterations.
Little known fact.
So when we're looking to accelerate this integration, we need to be able to stream data from any source to any other source based on what I'm reading on this slide. We need to be able to take data center events and stream them to cloud distributed architectures, transform those events for the next cloud. So we need to be able to accept these events, ingest them as data, modify them into the usable data for the next system, and transfer them to that system in what we see here as a closed loop box of pretty icons. What TriggerMesh is looking to provide is that one integration platform for everything. The reason you might want one integration platform for everything is because right now you have 452.7 integration platforms for nothing. And so you can see instantly, just based on the words I'm using to express an idea, that your existing architecture is actually crapitecture as mentioned, and you need TriggerMesh to save your soul. When we look at how this works, we have event producers on one side that are doing this amazing thing called producing events, that item in the shopping cart. As that event happens, we need to be able to transport that event, which would be an event router. The transportation is occurring to get the producer's event to the consumer of that event, but it also has to happen in a way that is consumable by that consumer. Insert TriggerMesh. The operations problem that's created in your current environment is exacerbated by the way we look at application architectures today. We have several trends that are accelerating the mess you're creating and spending a lot of money to do so. Multi-cloud communication, with 75% of mid-size and larger organizations having adopted a multi or hybrid cloud strategy, is creating this need for an interconnectedness of the events, the routing of those events, and the consumption of those events. As we move to hyper-automation from non-hyper-automation, which is obviously the slower non-hyper version of original automation, as we speed up that automation, we have more events being created, the consumption of more events, and a need to, again, rein this in from the 472.8 systems that you're trying to do it with today. All of this driving... What was that?
0.7 to 0.8. They're gradually increasing. You went from 0.7 to 0.8.
Darn, I was trying to recall the same number and I failed. As we start to look at this and we see that Gartner and Deloitte and all of the people that we worship as idols tell us that this is moving towards that event-driven workload architecture in order to modernize our real-time multi-cloud applications and capabilities. This brings up a giant data problem. And we all have a data problem. We create too much of it. We don't know how to use it. We try to analyze, create more data in that process. So as that data grows exponentially, we need better tools to extract that are faster to help us manipulate that data and turn it into something usable. Data itself has no purpose. Data processed into a usable fashion, services and applications that require it, creates the information we need to consume. And we need to be able to do this in a more expeditious fashion. What can you do with TriggerMesh to make this happen? Well, you can modernize your service buses so that no longer are you on these old yellow school buses. You're now on these like super cool, eco-friendly, automated, battery-operated buses. You can do that within your multi-cloud workflows, which is extremely important because no cloud likes to be left behind. It always needs some friends to feel okay in those socially awkward environments. We can also reduce our integration costs by consolidating the way in which we handle our event-driven architectures with one fluid, easy-to-integrate platform like TriggerMesh. In this, we can also replicate data in real time, which is extremely important because nobody likes fake time data. Finally, we'll be able to stream data between clouds, providing that routing for events between consumers and producers, and run serverless on-premise because everyone hates servers, even though we're not allowed to say it in public. Who TriggerMesh can help? If you're a cloud native developer and you're not talking to Mark Hinkle and his team, you're just not winning. If you're an ESB user and you know what that means, then you should probably also be talking to TriggerMesh. And then finally, if you're an IPAAS user or know how to pronounce that acronym, call Mark. DevOps, data ops, and developers are all dependent on TriggerMesh and the architecture they use to be able to rein in the complexity of your service-driven or event-driven architectures. I jumped back 20 years there with service-driven. Should have gone service-oriented, just close the loop. This case study from a global car rental company modernized by IBM's HQ with cloud-native integration from TriggerMesh shows you just how powerful TriggerMesh is because it's a case study on a slide, which makes it extremely important. This is also an important thing to look for when you're looking at low-code automation and having a portal that allows you to deploy all of that low-code automation from a single pane portal. The value TriggerMesh brings is an improvement in efficiency to allow you to more efficiently deploy, connect, and integrate these event-driven architectures, extending your investment in legacy into a modernized application environment, and being able to replace or cap expenditures on expensive and hard to maintain legacy architectures and software. Those three things are critical to any organization looking to modernize application operations. TriggerMesh is located and headquartered in RTP, North Carolina, a beautiful place in the southeast of the United States with some pretty temperate weather and some great people. All right, Sabrina.
Wow.
Mark, how did we do?
I think I'm going to have to concede before I even start. I mean, the fact that you use the word crapitecture in context of my slides and it made total sense, I'm adding it, you know.
You've now changed your entire business value prop based on today. Is that right? Is that what I'm
We
hearing?
clean up your crapitecture is our new tagline for the company, and courtesy of Joe.
I felt like it was a roller coaster yet again of emotions, Joe. You really brought your A game. I felt like we took a little, journey through history, not sequentially, which made no sense at all, but yet was very much appreciated. I would give you out of from a 1 to 10. I'd have to see Mark your prezo, but boy, you're doing pretty good, Joe. I was impressed.
Yeah, I don't think I can top it. I'm gonna try, but I don't have a good motorcycle haircut. I don't have an awesome beard, and I definitely don't have a do nuts, not donuts hat. So I mean, like, I have all these, limitations that I've got to overcome.
You're starting in the negative, yeah.
I am.
And yet you're so far ahead of Joe, right? I mean,
I do have Henry Rollins hovering over my head like a, demonic angel.
Yeah, and he looks pretty serious, Mark. So I'm a bit scared because with that serious angel over your head, I think you're going to make up for what you lack in beard with intelligence and understanding of the technology.
Well, I would hope so, but I wouldn't bet on it. All right. You ready for me to share these slides and wow you with my brilliant tech CEO?
Your braggatecture. Yeah.
The floor is yours, sir.
Braggatecture. We can cure cancer, solve the energy crisis, make everybody's pronouns work.
Thank you for bringing DEI into this. I appreciate that. It's top of mind for you too. All right.
Ooh.
Nice.
Live.
I'm Mark Hinkle. I'm the CEO and co-founder of TriggerMesh, and we provide open source cloud native integration. All right, this is what enterprises are facing. As my esteemed colleague and friend Joe has said, a crapitecture of stuff. We have a growing number of cloud services. We've got a heritage of legacy applications, and we got to figure out how to make that all work together. And it's infinitely frustrating. What TriggerMesh does is we accelerate integration. And the way we do that is we provide an event-driven architecture to take the output of one service, application, system, and use it as the input of another. Now, most of the time, you can't just take the output and make it actionable in the cloud from your legacy data center. Recently, we had to integrate 60-year-old IBM mainframe copybook technology with Amazon S3, and there is no, IBM mainframe connector to the cloud that makes sense. So what we did was we ingested the copybook, transformed it into an XML format that was actionable by the cloud, and that was the use case for that customer. You can also go the other way. So if you wanted to store data from the cloud back on-prem, for whatever reasons, for compliance, for archiving, whatever the system that you need to integrate, TriggerMesh can do that. And our secret sauce is really the ability to stream those events and then transform them in flight. So some of the terminology would be like change data capture. So you don't put a load on your event producer or on the cloud. You're doing it in flight. What TriggerMesh is a single integration platform for everyone. So what we do is we take your new cloud services, e-com apps that are written and hosted on Amazon, your mainframe apps, your ERP apps, your SAP on-prem, your Firebase databases for your mobile apps, and provide a way to integrate all of these systems not only integrate them, but share that data in real time, transform it so it meets the requirements of your inputs. And this is the real operations problem that a lot of folks are facing, is the vast majority of large enterprises out there are multi-cloud, and significantly multi-cloud. All of us are probably multi-cloud at some level. Hyper automation versus regular automation. What we mean by hyper automation is, for example, in the old school, you may run a job overnight, and that automatically runs every night, but it doesn't do it in real time. And that provides you a disadvantage in getting the data where you need it to be, when you need it to be there. And finally, we take an event-driven approach. So event-driven architecture, that's EDA, not just ED, Joe. What we mean by event-driven workloads are that the events, changes in one system, are informing the integration between the 2 points. Because there's an event generated every time something changes, we're not querying those systems. So there's no load put on that system. So you're writing to a log, you're creating a change in a database, and that generates an event. And that kind of integration versus API integration, which is synchronous, is non-blocking, and it's much faster. So if you're doing an API call, you would have to wait for the response, and that's slower. So that's what we mean by real-time, multi-cloud, hyper-automation, and we're hybrid. Here's the other interesting thing, is whether you're doing integration for the purposes of driving workloads or for syncing or replicating data, the mechanism is agnostic of how you transfer the data from one place to the other. So we have an exponential data growth problem. As we're speaking, Joe and I are generating, megabytes and megabytes of data for this recording, as is everyone on the planet. And the way that you would have extracted that data in the past is through ETL, which stands for extract, transform, and load. What that is those batch transactions when you deposit your check in the bank and it doesn't happen to hit the web interface or the mobile app until the next morning because it processes overnight. Those workloads are queued and they are blocking transactions. So you do not get the information as speedily as you would like, and the bank gets to keep your money for an extra day and make interest on your money. We take the ETL out of the equation by allowing you to do it in real time based on when an event happens. You can populate other systems. And the real problem around this, besides the blocking part, is the fact that maintaining data pipelines are hard. In the event-driven workflows that we're talking about, they're essentially data pipelines. But when you need to change those pipelines, you want to be able to do that as quickly and easily as possible. And to that end, we've orchestrated things in a way that you would use the same kind of infrastructure as code mechanism for our integration as code mechanism with TriggerMesh integration language. So what can you do with TriggerMesh? As I mentioned, you can take your legacy systems to the cloud, as we do with IBM MQ, which is a enterprise service bus that's used very prolifically in the data center around IBMs. We see MuleSoft and the integration cost for that integration platform as a service as being cost prohibitive for a lot of companies. And what we're advocating there is to either cap your integration costs with your existing integration solution, use the open source TriggerMesh platform, and if you choose to buy support, it's your option. You're not locked into a ever-growing integration bill. We can do lots of different things as far as cloud-to-cloud and event workflows. One of the most interesting things is you can replicate the Amazon Lambda experience on-prem on Kubernetes using TriggerMesh. So you could use Apache Kafka, which is a open source data streaming technology, to trigger function as a service workloads on Knative. The kind of people that we help are basically cloud native developers. By providing a framework for you to do the integrations, you can deploy applications and integrate those applications in the same way on a serverless framework or in a containerized environment. For ESB users, we can take your queued with blocking enterprise service buses and bridge them to the cloud. And for enterprise, for integration platform as a service users, I wanted to say the acronym for you, Joe, because it's hard to say IPaaS. And the new Gartner term for this is EIPaaS. It's sort of like Old MacDonald had a farm, EIPaaS.
So Joe wasn't even close. Not even close, Joe.
Not even close. But for these integration users, a lot of the existing users are stuck with the catalog that the provider has, or it's difficult to extend. By having an open source platform to create integrations allows you to leverage other people's creations and make your own. We are the integration platform aimed at the DevOps, the data ops, and developers. And we have 3 different flavors. So we have a Kubernetes-like declarative API to deploy integrations. So if you're a Kubernetes user, a DevOps cloud operator, that's probably going to be very similar to the way that you already work. If you're a developer, you can use a TriggerMesh integration language, and that is very similar to HashiCorp's configuration language for Terraform, and it looks very much like JSON that you probably already understand. And finally, for the less technical data ops folks who just want to get the data to where they can use it, we have a low-code visual editor. So think of it as a enterprise-level Zapier for your data apps. And this is just a manifestation of our technology at a global rental car company who has IBM MQ, and they want to be able to analyze that data in the Amazon cloud using other tools like Elastic. And what we do is we've provided a bridge between their data center and the cloud, and it allows, even though those events that come in through a message bus are queued messages, it still provides a pathway from the data center to the cloud. And if you don't want to do all that programming, we have our low-code automation portal, which is very, very easy and intuitive to use. You can set it up, you can delegate to other people in your enterprise so that they can go and have self-service for their data streams. So in summary, the value we bring, other than comic relief and entertaining slideshows, is we provide improved efficiency. We work the way that cloud operators work, and we work at quote unquote cloud speed. If you have a greenfield project and you want to be able to integrate cloud services and still be able to have the option to integrate your legacy heritage, that is one place where we can really improve efficiency. For those of you that have existing investment in especially in the mainframe legacy systems, custom apps, and you want to take advantage of, mobile apps developed in the cloud, you want to take advantage of other SaaS-based services, we provide a way for you to extend your investment in your existing operations while moving forward with a modern cloud architecture. And when those things become too old to extend the investment in, TriggerMesh provides a replacement path that is not only modern, it's cloud native, it's open source, all the traits that you should be looking at for all of your infrastructure moving forward. So thank you for your time today. We are located in the sunny South, best vinegar barbecue on the East Coast, and in snowy Switzerland in Geneva. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Sabrina, are you prepared to deliver Mark the bad news?
I mean, I got to tell you, there's some really obviously great things that TriggerMesh is doing and solving a real problem. But there was a couple things that really surprised me that came up in your presentation. For starters, didn't think ED would come up. That got me. If you gave me $1 million to guess what would definitely come up, never would I guess that. So that made me happy. And then barbecue. I mean, I think just the spectrum of randomness that you were able to incorporate into a very good message, really got me. Really got me.
I missed like the tie-in to Goldblum. If I could get Goldblum in there, then I would have had the trifecta. But barbecue and ED, yeah.
You can't go wrong. Maybe it's the barbecue that's caused. Anyway, it's a clean show. I won't. That really got me. That got me. And then, I know this is way off, but the hyper automation, I just imagine all these engineers like all jacked up on sugar, bouncing off the walls, like, we got to automate. So my brain just started, just kind of created.
Well, one of our company benefits is Red Bull IV infusions.
There you go.
So, yeah.
Oh, nice.
There you go.
Yes.
It's sponsored to you, brought to you today, sponsored by Red Bull. Yeah.
So I think there's a new TriggerMesh tagline that's coming up. It's like, banks hate us. Like, we remove your excuse for batch processing and interest gaining.
Yeah.
So looking,
it's funny, I didn't think about that, but all of our customers are banks.
You're gonna love this. You're gonna love this. This is for you. Yeah.
So listening to you go through that, I was thinking, it seems like a big piece of your value proposition is the decoupling of integrating event consumers from event producers, so that a change that happens on one side doesn't mean you have to rewrite all the code for both pieces. Is that fair?
Yeah. So that's you're touching on one part and the other, like the 1-2 punch is it's the microservices architecture. But the second thing is transforming the data on the fly. Because if you think about the way we were doing things 15, 20 years ago, you had the data warehouse that was the data center of gravity. And what was happening is every time you put a query against that, it adds a load. And by taking the decoupling of the queries and just putting the data, we're really just replicating data to everywhere with a, like if you're using Kafka, it's basically a 7-day database by default, that you have a history of everything. So you're not querying your data warehouse. And if you look at what a lot of people are doing, and this is a little far afield from what TriggerMesh does on a regular basis, but what's this trend is a lot of folks have read-only databases, because when you start writing the databases, A, you open up a security hole, B, you also provide a load on the database itself. Same thing on the cloud side. And some of those databases and some of those cloud services are actually charging by the transaction and by the CPU cycle. So with TriggerMesh, you can do it for free, or you can pay us a set flat fee, and you don't have that problem of if you're forecasting your costs, it's hard to say how many transactions am I going to run against Google, Microsoft, Azure, or Amazon, and make sure that I have predictable costing of my infrastructure. So we're actually taking a step back in the sense that we don't do metered usage. We may in the future, but people are sick of the metered usage because you can't forecast it. And sometimes that metered usage, like we have a cloud bill right now within our company that something ran amok as we were testing it, and we're stuck with that, and we didn't get $15,000 worth of value out of it, but we left the lights on and the stereo turned up when we went on vacation. So that's
so you're also doing kind of real-time language translation for data too. So if the event producer ships an item and sends me a tag saying item out, you can translate that to what my database expects, which is inventory reduce or something to that effect.
Yeah. Like I could see, if you have an Oracle database and every time you insert a row and you want to put it into a key value store, we could say, just take column 1 and column 2 and populate the key value store for, an NoSQL database in the cloud. And you might want to do that for, making sure that you have a bank and they acquire another bank and they want to make sure that they're locking out so they don't have a duplicate ID problem. They could just put the user's name and their ID in there so that can be the canonical source in the cloud for, signups for mortgage applications or account applications without having to create a source of truth. Because this is always I did a lot of M&A stuff in tech late 90s. And the biggest thing is we were ISP buying other ISPs, and you had all this data, and you had the canonical database, and you're trying to merge it in, and you would create usernames like Joe O at netcom@earthlink.com, that kind of crazy, problem. So by actually, replicating data and reducing the overlap as much as possible, we want to get data closer to our users, the end user, whether it's for the sake of the data itself or for driving, a serverless function on Netlify, or for doing, every time you get shop, I use this Shop Pay if you ever check out, and that's a very good example of event-driven architecture. Is as soon as you get there and tell them who they are, it pushes the shop, and then they give you, every time UPS updates your order, you get a little text or email, and that kind of, up-to-date information is great. That way I don't leave my, package laying on my porch for the neighbors to steal. I know it's right there right away because I got the up-to-the-minute information.
Gotcha. So you're basically normalizing event communication across complex systems architectures.
Yes. Yes. We're part of a stack. That's the thing is, we feel like the value is being the connector and transforming the data. We don't want to be in data streaming. You have Kafka, you have Confluent, you've got RabbitMQ, you've got, SQS, Amazon's SQS. And that part is not in our wheelhouse. What we want to do is, we want to be the Rosetta Stone for all of your events. And that's really the, takeaway from what TriggerMesh does.
Gotcha. So you're BYOS, bring your own stream, whereas I'm BYOBS.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And sometimes it's not even the stream, it's, the drip from queued message buses. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, Mr. Hinkle, thank you very much. Ms. Shafer, thank you for even though I don't think you judged me as the better presenter, I do appreciate you coming here to beat me up.
I did not. You did. I'm going to call this one, Mark. You won. Congratulations. You've got a big prize. Prize coming your way. We're not sure what it is yet, so we'll figure that out. And when we do, we will send it your way. But yeah, you're the winner. I mean, take that on with pride. Throw it on your LinkedIn, Yeah.
Thank you. I'm honored. Do you want to know a funny little backstory?
Yes, I do.
This is a Joe and Mark, how we met. So I was at cloud.com I just started at Citrix, and we were hiring evangelists. And we had two candidates. This guy, ex-military, clean cut at the time, and I always like to hire the ex-military guys. And we met at a coffee shop somewhere, talked about this position, and then I had this other guy who was this French madman, PhD from Clemson University. And the sales guy and the CEO had seen all of this guy's posts. So I had the one job. It came down to Joe and this guy, Sebastian Goswan. And I'm like, this guy's military. He's not a smart ass. He's going to be very, down to business kind of guy. And Shen was like, we really ought to get this Sebastian guy. He's posting all about Trigger or Cloud.com, Apache Cloud Stack at the time, or Cloud Stack. It wasn't even Apache by that point. So we hired this guy, Sebastian, at Citrix, and this other guy, Joe, goes on to Insamy and makes a shit ton of money and sort of goes into retirement up in the, mountains of the Western US. So this French guy pisses me off every day I work with him for years, but he's a good guy. So about 10 years after I hired him, I started this company called TriggerMesh with him. And to this day, I'm stuck with him every damn day. And I'm jealous of Joe's ranch.
That is hilarious. And to be honest, like, I was bringing my BS game strong because you were like Mr. Open Source, and I was like Mr. Don't know how to spell open source.
Right.
Could you imagine if the worlds would have changed, though? Sebastian and I started a company, and you and Joe started TriggerMesh. Just absolutely, completely flipped.
I think that Joe and my company may have a bigger legal fund than your and Sebastian's company.
That's fair.
And
yeah, I can imagine.
You may have a capital murder charge on you.
What would that company be called? I just imagine, like, what would a Mark and Joe company be?
Mojo. Mark and Joe.
I love it. Well, when we both finish the things we're doing, we know our next plan.
That's
right. Exactly. I've ordered my RV for the dog, and the dog and I are going on the road. Actually, we're going to do that. That's how I'm going to finish out working at TriggerMesh until they kill me or we get acquired or go public.
So stay tuned for that.
I've got an RV pad with full hookups anytime you need a place to park for a day or two.
In 2 weeks, I should be able to go pick up my 4x4 adventure van, and I'll be heading west. So I may take you up on that.
Wow.
Good deal. Good deal.
Cool.
Well, gents, this was fun. Joe, I'm sorry for another loss. It was a little expected, to be honest. But you tried. You gave it your best. You gave it your BS best. Yeah. Nice job.
I gave it my BS-test. Thank you all very much for joining this episode of Tech Deck Karaoke with CEO, co-founder TriggerMesh, Mark Hinkle. This was another brilliant episode, not only because I'm awesome, mainly in this case because Mark is awesome. Thanks again.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Sabrina. Have a great day.
You too.
Take care, everybody.